have an optional win session for all interested 10th and 11th grade students a couple weeks ago now. And it was fairly well attended. I think we had probably a total of about 40 students that came to learn a little bit more about the option. We told them, and I will say here again tonight, that our job is basically to point you in the direction of the information, but the PSEO process is definitely a student-driven process, a family-driven process. So we're hoping that by the time you leave tonight, you know where to find all of the information that you would need to proceed with an application. There's really very little that we do as a part of that application process, with the exception of a signature on one of the forms each semester, and sending the transcripts when we get an email request to do so from students. So obviously you're here because on some level you're considering PSEO as an option for your student. There we go. Oops, now it's all the way through. So we thought it would be important for the first part of the presentation tonight to talk just a little bit about what is PSEO, what type of student is a good fit for PSEO, and what are items that we want to make sure that students that are considering this option have thought about and discussed as a family prior to making a final decision about PSEO. So that'll be my portion of the presentation, and then Ms. Baumann is going to take over with more the specifics. If you do down the road decide that this is an option that is a good fit for you, we're going to talk specifically about where you go to find that information to be able to submit the application. So starting out first with just what is PSEO? PSEO is a state-run program that allows mostly juniors and seniors. There are some limited classes available for 10th grade students, but mostly juniors and seniors to take college courses and earn both high school and college credit for those courses at no cost to the student. So basically it's a dual enrollment program. So students who are taking PSEO courses are dually enrolled. They're enrolled in the college, earning college credit, generating a college transcript, and at the same time, they're enrolled in high school, translating those PSEO credits into high school credits, working towards the graduation requirements, and completing their high school transcript at the same time. Students can choose to take PSEO either full-time or part-time. So students that are doing so full-time don't have any classes that they take here at the high school. They're taking all of their courses through the college, and those credits are then transferring back to satisfy their requirements each year. Or they can choose to do so part-time, where they're taking one or more college courses, but also still taking some courses here at the high school. And I would say more often than not, students will start out full or part-time and kind of get a feel for it, make sure it's a good fit for them, and then if it's feeling good and they're able to handle things at the level that they would like to be able to handle things, then they move from part-time to full-time. That isn't the path that every student takes, but I would say that's the most common route for most students. Colleges do offer PSEO courses both in a traditional format, where students are driving to the campus and sitting in the college classroom with all the other college students, and they do offer some online to offer a little bit more flexibility for students. Those online courses are typically solely online, meaning they don't go to the college campus at all. They're completing the work from home. Obviously that creates some flexibility in a student schedule, which I think is a draw for some students, especially busy students who are kind of ready for the next phase or another challenge. And then the last thing is there is no tuition or fees involved with PSEO unless the student forgets to return their textbooks, because they are just renting the textbooks. And I guess I should say there is a bit of a cost when it comes to transportation, because transportation is not provided, so students do, if they're taking the on-campus classes, they do have to find their way to and from campus for those classes.
And parking.
And parking, yes. In terms of, generally speaking, what makes a good PSEO student, we selected these three characteristics. Someone who's mature, who's independent, and who's going to be proactive. I think I would add things like someone who's responsible, someone who's a self-starter, somebody who's a good communicator, who's able to reach out if they have questions or seek out information when they have questions about something. Because again, it's a very student-driven process. It's something that the students have to be on top of in order to be successful. And it's a new experience for them. Seeking out resources on the college campus is going to look and feel very different than seeking out resources on the high school campus. So they really need to feel comfortable with seeking out information and help as needed. When Ms. Baumann talks a little bit about the application process and the process that has to happen at the beginning of each semester, there's a lot of paperwork that goes along with PSEO, and it's important that students are very on top of that paperwork, because if they miss certain deadlines, then they miss the opportunity to register for the courses that they want to take, and they end up settling for courses that they didn't really want to take, or having to come back and take some classes at the high school because they just didn't get into their PSEO courses. In terms of just some general topics that we just feel like it's important for students and parents to be aware of as they're exploring this option. Generally speaking, students who are taking PSEO courses are really kind of living in two different worlds. They're navigating the college world and everything that comes along with that, but also needing to keep up with everything that's happening in the high school world. And I would say that this year in particular, if there's one piece of feedback that I've heard from the students that are taking PSEO courses, it is that it's a challenge to keep up with both worlds. You know, some students are more than ready to say goodbye to the high school environment, even as a junior or senior, and go off and experience something new and feel like they're moving on in some way. And for other students, it's a lot harder to let go of that connection in the high school building, especially if they're a highly involved student, or if there's particular classes here that they want to continue to try to stay connected with. Class schedules are different PSEO versus high school. So even something as simple as when each semester starts, it doesn't line up exactly. Generally, college second semester is going to start immediately after winter break, and we still have a 2 to 3 week period to finish up first semester once we get back from winter break. So in terms of living in both worlds, you're also following the schedule of whichever class you need to, and that doesn't always line up very neatly. If students are deciding that they're just going to take a class or a couple classes through PSEO, and there's certain classes that they want to be able to take here at the high school, they also need to make sure that they're coordinating that so that they aren't signing up for PSEO courses that are offered at the same time that they need to be here, especially if they're interested in courses here that are only offered 1 or 2 periods a day. So I think choir is a good example of that. We have a lot of students that will take all PSEO courses, but they want to come back for choir. Well, their section of choir is only offered 1 period of the day. We won't know exactly what period that's offered until a little bit later in the year, but that's where that coordination piece comes in. And so maybe there needs to be a little flexibility where they have to take an earlier PSEO course than they intended, or a later PSEO course than they intended, or I even have a couple students that do a split shift, where they come to the high school for periods 1 and 2, and then they're off in the middle part of the day to attend the PSEO courses or work on their online PSEO courses, and then they come back for a 7th-hour class. So it's not always real clean. Students have to be willing to kind of be flexible and maybe go to plan B or C if their first plan doesn't work out. Like I said before, transportation is not provided. So one of the things I always recommend to students and families is take a practice drive to the college that you're planning on taking classes at, so that you kind of get an idea of what that drive is like. Imagine doing it in February. Take a look at what the parking is like on campus. Just so, again, you're considering everything to be able to make an informed decision. And then this is a relatively newer one, but you may need to also have access to a device at home in order to complete the necessary PSEO work. So if a student is taking an academic course here, they will be issued one of the school Chromebooks. But sometimes those school Chromebooks and the firewalls and things that are set up on those school Chromebooks aren't compatible with what they need to access for the PSEO classes. So we do often say you may need to work with the PSEO institution to see what's available to you there, or have access to a device at home to make sure that you can get into everything that you need to for those PSEO courses. If the student is not taking any academic courses here, so maybe it's just a choir course that they're taking here, something that wouldn't require a Chromebook, then they are not issued a Mound Westonka Chromebook for that semester. In terms of grading and transcripts, I think this is always one of the big questions for students and families. So all of the PSEO courses are set up as semester-long courses, and most of those semester-long courses are worth 3 or more credits. 3 or 4, I think, is typical. Each semester college course that's worth 3 or more credits is going to transfer back into high school credits as one full year requirement. So if you think about juniors and seniors are required to take a full year of English and a full year of social studies of some sort. If a student is choosing to satisfy those requirements through PSEO, that would be equal to 1 semester college course, say a freshman comp course, to satisfy the English requirement, and then an additional semester of World Civ or Government Econ to satisfy the social studies requirement. So 1 semester in college, as long as it's worth 3 or more credits, is going to transfer back as fulfilling that full year-long requirement. So I always say to students, when you're trying to decide, how many classes should I take PSEO, how many classes should I take here at the high school? I always say, translate all of those PSEO credits back into high school credits and aim for about 7 credits for the academic year. That would be the same amount of credits that a student would earn if they took a full schedule here, no prep periods, and passed all their classes. So in terms of workload, it's somewhat comparable. Now obviously some students are ready for more, some students need to start out a little bit slower than that. It's totally up to the individual student. That's one of the beauties of the PSEO program, is you get to kind of create whatever schedule is going to work best for you. But in terms of translating the credits back, that's how you would figure that out. And we take what's given to us by the college and we transfer it directly to your high school transcript. We have no jurisdiction over any of that. So whatever it is that we're given is what gets placed onto your high school transcript for the equal amount of credit. So a semester college comp A will actually factor in as 1 full credit or 2 semesters worth of high school credit at the high school level because it's satisfying that full year requirement.
And just to add to that, we don't have a choice. You can't take things off. So if you had a chem class that you didn't really do well, but you took it through the PSEO program, that's going on your high school transcript no matter what. Even if you try to cut it out of your transcript and give me a transcript in which that is missing, that actually has happened, or copy and paste on a copier, we're still gonna get the grades from the college or the university and we're gonna be transferring them completely. So there is a liability there at times too when you decide to go and take a Calc 3 class, and knowing that can be tough and that could change GPA when it comes to applying to colleges down the road. So.
And those college credits that a student is earning, they become a part of the permanent college transcript. So even though a student might only be 16 or 17 years old when they're taking those college courses and they're doing it through the PSEO program, they are still earning college credit, and those classes and grades will become a part of the permanent transcript, which I think is another reason why students will often choose to ease themselves into the PSEO process, just to make sure that they can handle it and they're feeling good about the grades that are first appearing on their college transcript. The last thing I will say has to do with how do those PSEO credits that you earn transfer when it comes to undergraduate, when you eventually apply to go off to college. And basically you're going to want to work with the PSEO advisor on that. Each time you register, you do have access to meet with the advisor to ask those questions. I would say that most of the courses that PSEO students are even eligible to take through the PSEO program are fairly transferable credits. I think you can rest assured that most of the credits you earn through PSEO will transfer with you in some way to the college once you're applying as an undergraduate student. But there is a website called transferology.com, and I think it's actually a website that a lot of the college advisors use, where you can go on and say, all right, if I take a Normandale College Comp class, how will that transfer to St. Thomas, or how will that transfer to Mankato State, or Minnesota State at Mankato? So you do have resources that you can look at, but again, I think rest assured that the majority of the PSEO courses you earn credit for are going to be transferable credits.
Camp and I discussed it, we were gonna try to keep this presentation under 20 minutes. She went way over her half, so we're gonna try to cruise a little bit here. I'm usually one who talks a lot, so it's actually making me feel good. Where can you take PSEO classes? So most colleges and universities in the state of Minnesota offer it, but not every single one does. So for example, Augsburg and St. Thomas, they elect to not participate in the state's PSEO program. The advantage for colleges that do participate is that they do get that tuition money from the state to offer a class they might have already been offering at full cost tuition. So it's a little bit of a tuition boost for them to offer it. You know, the spectrum of where kids go to PSEO ranges from Crown College down the road all the way to St. Olaf where they live on campus. I think I've had 1 in 13 years that have done that, by the way, but that's the spectrum. Most common places to do PSEO for our students, and again, there are several everywhere, are MCTC, or it's called now Minneapolis College is what they go by, to kind of mirror St. Paul College, Normandale Community College, and then the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. All 3 of them have a different application process, but if I get a t-shirt right now as a counselor that says everything I ever learned about PSEO, I learned by going on the college's website, that's what it would say, because that's really where you get the information on what each application is required. I believe the U of M's application releases on Friday, did we say? Or maybe it was last week Friday. Every school has a different admission criteria. Again, that's very clearly laid out on those schools' websites. And if you go to, literally, this is our counselor secret, I just type in Google, PSEO, University of Minnesota Twin Cities, I don't even have it saved on my computer, it pulls up their PSEO website, but they also, almost all of them have parent information nights, in which you can drive down on campus, you can meet with the PSEO advisors, you can get more information about what their admission criteria are, and those are happening really right now, all the way until probably April-ish. And so that's a really great way to get information as well, that's really specific to that college. But again, each of them do have a different application process and criteria that is spelled out on that website. So again, number 1, check the website, check the deadlines. So for example, I believe the use application is April 1st, 2nd, 3rd, somewhere in the beginning of April. It might be the 15th now, I'm actually not familiar yet.
Pushed it back.
Yeah, I think they pushed it back too. And then what is required of their application steps. So just to give you a little example, at MCTC, in order to complete your application, you need to have done a placement test that says you're ready to take college tests. At the University of Minnesota, no placement test, okay? And so every school is gonna have a different process, but they will, I promise you, on each of their websites, it lays out what you need in order to complete your application. Normandale, they want some kind of college admission score, either the pre-ACT, which 10th graders are taking in a couple weeks, or the ACT, which juniors are also taking in a couple weeks. The U will also take that, but MCTC just doesn't require that. So everything is kind of different based on that school. Again, scheduling a visit is really a great way through those parent information nights, or by just scheduling a tour to tour that campus. Understanding what it's like to drive to Normandale on 494 in the middle of a snowstorm is a really important thing for all of us to learn. I have quarterly meetings at Hemp and Tech for a different program that we run here at school, and I swear it snows every single time I have one of those meetings, and to be stuck on 494 when there's 2 inches of snow is excruciating. And so I would just encourage that conversation about, are you ready to park and are you ready to drive in this weather if you do plan on doing the actual commuting to campus thing. Again, placement testing. Often placement testing at Normandale, placement testing is done after you get accepted. At MCTC, placement testing is done prior to getting accepted. So following those little discrepancies between each of those institutions will be important. I could go on about Henman Tech as well. And then you're going to complete an application. So the application takes probably 15-20 minutes for each of the schools. Nothing too long. I typically would do them during homeroom last year with kids, which was like 23 minutes. So about that long. And then we are going to do you a solid. If you were just at the junior parent night, we said request all transcripts through Parchment. However, when it comes to PSEO, we're actually going to send a transcript for you. So as soon as we hear from that student that they've completed their application, we'll then send a transcript for you to that college because they have a special email process they would like us to use. Lastly, there is this one piece of paperwork that Ms. Campa was referring to. It's called the Notice of Student Registration, Notice of Student Enrollment. What is it? Notice of Student Registration, that's what it is called. It certifies that you are a member of our district, that we approve that we're going to use the money that we would have charged the state for you and supplement that money off to that PSEO institution. So basically it's how your tuition gets paid. it is the most crucial step of this process as far as making sure things get done, and that can only be done by the student. So every student, every semester gets an email from admissions saying, hey, it's time to get that form filled out, and if that student ignores that email, they will not get that form filled out from their counselor, and then they will not be able to register, and their tuition will not be covered for the following semester. So this is really an excellent test of kind of making sure all the processes are completed. It's kind of a nice trial run in case your student might be doing financial aid down the road, making sure they get all their paperwork in on time. But that is something that we expect students to come to us with completely filled out on top. We fill out the bottom portion, and then we give it back to the student, and then they take it to that college or university. We don't submit it for you. That's just something that the student has to submit on their own behalf. So again, that notice of student registration, important piece, and it's done every single semester. Something I missed on the last slide was the University of Minnesota requires a balance sheet, just a certification of what credits you need, so when you meet with your advisor, they know how to direct you for classes. That's something we will also meet with you and do once you've been accepted to the University of Minnesota, or I guess it's part of your application process, so we'll do that prior, along with the other form. Part of your student's responsibility is to submit to us what classes they are taking. We will have no way of showing them whether or not they're meeting their graduation requirements unless they submit those courses to us. I don't get to call Normandale and say, hey, what's Joe taking this semester? Or how's Joe doing this semester? I don't get any of that. So I need Joe to come back to me and let me know what classes they are taking. Once they get their grades done, we expect them to then return their grades to us so that we can transcribe them to their high school transcript here. Another big important piece of that process, and that's really reliant on the students. My students have been great this year, but I think I've spent 13 years talking about it, and so finally they're kind of there. And then I love it when my PSEO students, which I have 30 this year, I think about, they just set up meetings with me quarterly, once a semester, and they say, hey, can we look at my transcript? Can we make sure I'm on track for graduation? What do you think about these classes? Sometimes students complete all of their high school requirements during their junior year. So then we talk about what classes they might want to take their senior year that would help them maybe transfer to another school. So for example, a lot of majors require communications or psychology or sociology. So we start to encourage them to take some of those classes that might help with a major down the road, or look at the college websites to see what they should take their senior year that would increase transferability. So we just expect students to communicate with us by email or by setting up an appointment with us. They're very helpful meetings, but I don't seek out PSEO students to do that. We really expect them to do that on their own. Let's see. Yeah, just important things to be aware of. You can tell we repeat ourselves because these are kind of barriers we run into in this process, and really the reason for meeting for today. Admission standards and deadlines are all set by the college and by the university. I went to a PSEO information session at the University of Minnesota like 3 years ago, and at that time they said they pretty much were taking kids with a 3.7 or higher, and more recently they were publishing 3.9 or higher. So it just tells you how selective the process has become. And I think they were really struggling with how successful students were being in that program. So they really honed in on who they thought might be the most successful students there, not anyone on the border, especially at the U, which is so big and requires a lot from students. Students and families, it's your process. We're here to support you, but it is your process. We don't get to call on your behalf. So if you have questions or need any help, there is always a PSEO advisor at every college campus. They are not as readily available as Ms. Kemp or Ms. Bauman and I may be, where you can just kind of walk up at lunch and ask us a question. So practicing that, making an appointment, which might be 1 or 2 weeks out or things like that. So communicating by email or by phone is an important part of this process. Attendance matters. Nothing makes us shake in our boots more than when we get a notice that a student has been dropped from a PSEO course because they weren't attending. That transfers as an F to your transcript here. And it could affect things like graduation if they choose to not attend their English comp class or another class that is required for graduation. So we really just got to keep in mind that attendance is a requirement. And students, as we've mentioned, it's really your responsibility to make sure that you're checking deadlines and checking the high school website to make sure you're tuned into things like when cap and gown orders are due, or when the local scholarship process starts, which is in a few weeks for our seniors. And honestly, our seniors have been awesome about it. Recently, they've been really great about checking things, but it does take a lot of independence and a lot of proactivity on the part of the student. So if that's ever been a struggle for your student, it's really time to have a great conversation about whether or not that's a good fit, because it's required. Are there any other questions that you have? again, those websites are really, really helpful. Parent nights are really helpful, and then there's a great PSEO resource on the MDE website, so that goes over all the information that that PSEO covers. As far as, that's what I refer to when all of a sudden, recently I got a call from MCTC saying, you owe us money for a book, and I'm like, oh, books are covered through the state statute, and I was able to go there and show them that. But they were ready to charge a family like $800 for their books, and so those little things are always helpful through the MDE website, but I use the same resources that you guys would. Oh, 4 minutes over, actually it was 6 minutes over. Thanks for coming, this really helps us kind of help you. Go ahead and explore those websites, start those applications, and if we can kind of meet you at halfway through the process and help you kind of clean things up, we're happy to do that. But really getting started is on the students' behalf.